Clara, a 22-year-old young woman, had always lived in luxury. Since she was a child, she had everything she could ever wish for. Her father, a successful businessman, made sure to provide her with a life of comfort and abundance. She lived in a huge mansion with a stunning garden and an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Everything seemed perfect in Clara's life. She had the most modern toys as a child, and now, as an adult, she had clothes from the best brands, trips to exotic places, and a luxury car that many could only dream of having. Despite all this luxury, Clara had a peculiarity. She hated animals, especially dogs. She thought they were dirty, noisy, and had no place in her glamorous life. Whenever she saw a dog, she made a point of looking away and changing direction. She couldn't understand how people could like those animals. Clara loved parties and social events. Her life was a constant celebration, surrounded by friends and fun. She organized parties at her mansion almost every weekend. Loud music, laughter, and joy were part of her daily life. She enjoyed being the center of attention and showing everyone how fabulous her life was. However, there was one thing Clara didn't like: studying. She found school boring and pointless. To her, the time spent in school could be better used on trips, shopping, or parties. Her father always told her that studying was important, that she needed to prepare for the future. But Clara didn't care about those things. She thought that with all the money and privileges she had, she didn't need to worry about the future. Everything seemed guaranteed. Despite her father's warnings, Clara continued to live her life carelessly. She thought she would always have everything handed to her and that nothing could disrupt her happiness. However, she was about to discover that life could be much more complicated and that the choices we make can have profound consequences. But that, Clara didn't know yet. Clara's lifestyle was enviable in the eyes of many. She lived in a world of privileges and excesses. International trips, designer clothes, glamorous parties, all were part of her daily routine. Her friends accompanied her on all her adventures, and Clara was always the star of the group. But there was something that bothered her: her father's constant demands that she take her studies seriously. Her father, Roberto, was a hard-working man who always valued education. He believed that Clara needed to learn the importance of preparing for the future and being responsible. Roberto tried in every way to convince Clara to dedicate herself to her studies, but she thought it was a waste of time. For her, life was a continuous party, and studying was not part of her plans. One afternoon, while Clara was relaxing by the pool at her mansion, Roberto approached her with a serious expression. He explained to her once again the importance of studying and building a solid future. Clara, bored with the conversation, rolled her eyes and replied dismissively, "Dad, why do I need to study? We have enough money, and I'll always have everything I want. I don't need to worry about these boring things." Roberto sighed deeply, frustrated with his daughter's attitude. He knew he couldn't force her to understand, but he also knew he needed to do something to make Clara realize the importance of his words. He then decided to take drastic action. He would cut off the generous allowance he gave his daughter. It was a difficult decision, but Roberto believed it was the only way to make Clara reflect on her choices. When Clara found out that her father had cut off her allowance, she was furious. She felt betrayed and wronged. "How can he do this to me?" she thought. To Clara, it was inconceivable that her father would rather spend money helping animal shelters than giving it to her to spend as she pleased. The idea that dogs and cats, the same ones she despised, were benefiting from the money that used to be hers made her even more outraged. Determined to show her father that she didn't need him, Clara began planning a way to get back at him and prove her independence. She decided she would live life her own way, without the restrictions imposed by Roberto. Clara was about to make a choice that would change her life forever, unaware of the consequences this decision would bring. In her revolt, Clara decided to do something daring. She took the keys to the luxury car her father had given her as a gift and decided to take a trip with her friends without telling anyone. She wanted to show that she could have fun and live without her father's help. They planned the trip in secret, knowing that Roberto would never approve. The next morning, Clara left home driving her sports car. She felt powerful and free, with the wind blowing through her hair and the music blaring on the radio. She picked up her phone to call her best friend and share the excitement about the adventure they were about to embark on. As she chatted and laughed, Clara didn't notice that she was becoming increasingly distracted from the road. Suddenly, everything happened very quickly. Clara lost control of the car, which skidded and veered off the road. The vehicle rolled over several times before coming to a stop, wrecked at the edge of a cliff. Clara felt intense pain and realized she was trapped in the wreckage. Fear overwhelmed her as she tried to move without success. Alone and scared, Clara began to cry, wishing she had listened to her father's advice. She was on the brink of despair when she heard an unexpected sound that would change everything. As Clara lay trapped in the wreckage, feeling pain and fear, she heard a sound that caught her attention. It was a faint but persistent bark. At first, she thought she was imagining things, but the sound continued. With great effort, she turned her head towards the sound and saw a dog. It was thin and dirty, with matted fur, but it approached slowly, as if it were also scared. Clara couldn't believe what she was seeing. There was a dog, exactly the type of animal she despised. It sniffed the air and cautiously moved closer. Clara, feeling a mix of emotions, tried to speak to it. "Hey, are you really there?" The dog took a few more steps, unafraid, and seemed to understand that Clara was injured and needed help. Clara reached out, trembling, trying to show she wasn't a threat. The dog came closer until its nose touched her hand. Feeling the cold, wet touch of the dog's nose brought Clara unexpected comfort. "You came to help me, didn't you?" she murmured, tears streaming down her face. The dog licked her hand as if to calm her. Clara felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this dog could somehow help her out of this terrible situation. With a spark of renewed hope, Clara began trying to communicate with the dog. "Please help me, I'm trapped." She knew the animal couldn't understand her words, but she hoped it could somehow sense her desperate situation. The dog, with a determined look, started sniffing around the wreckage as if searching for a way to help. Suddenly, it found a piece of fabric caught in the debris. It was one of the sheets that had been in the car's trunk. The dog began to pull the sheet with all its might, trying to free Clara. Each tug caused her body to move slowly, creating a mix of pain and relief. As the dog struggled to help her, Clara felt a wave of gratitude and regret. She thought about all the times she ignored her father's advice and despised animals. Now, a stray dog was doing everything it could to save her. With effort and determination, the dog finally managed to drag Clara out of the wreckage. She was exhausted and in pain, but she knew she couldn't give up. The dog, faithful and tireless, continued to bark desperately, calling for help. Clara knew she had to stay conscious and fight for her life. She looked at the dog and murmured a thank you, feeling an unexpected connection with the animal that was now her hero. As the dog kept barking desperately, Clara began to feel a new hope. She knew the dog's barking could attract someone's attention. The minutes dragged on, and every second felt like an eternity. Clara tried to stay awake, focusing on the sound of the barks and the comforting presence of the dog by her side. Finally, Clara heard voices and footsteps approaching. A rescue team, drawn by the dog's barking, appeared through the trees. When they saw Clara and the state she was in, they rushed to help her. The dog stayed by Clara's side, watching closely as the rescuers worked to free her. "You're going to be okay," one of the rescuers said, trying to calm her. They quickly assessed her condition and placed her on a stretcher. As they carried her to the ambulance, Clara looked at the dog. Their eyes met, and even without words, she knew it understood how grateful she was. At the hospital, Clara was taken straight to the emergency room. She had severe injuries and would need multiple surgeries. While the doctors worked to stabilize her, the dog waited outside, faithfully. While in the operating room, Clara thought about how quickly her life had changed. All she wanted now was a second chance to do things differently. She was determined to value her life and the things that truly mattered more. The hours dragged on while Clara was in surgery. Her father, upon receiving news of the accident, rushed to the hospital. He was filled with worry and guilt, reflecting on his own decisions. When he finally saw Clara, she was exhausted and covered in bandages, but alive. The first days of recovery were tough. Clara dealt with physical pain and the emotional impact of the accident. Confined to her hospital bed, she had plenty of time to reflect on her past choices. She thought about the parties, the shopping sprees, and how she repeatedly ignored her father's advice. Her father was always by her side, supporting her every step of the way. They had many deep and emotional conversations. He explained how he always wanted her to find purpose and be happy. "I always wanted the best for you. It wasn't just about comfort. I wanted you to grow, be strong, and find a path to that." Clara began to realize how her actions affected not only herself, but also those around her. Her father's words helped her see life from a new perspective. She had been rebellious and carefree, thinking that good things would always be available to her, without effort. But the accident and near-fatal experience forced her to reevaluate her priorities. Clara constantly thought about the dog that saved her. That animal, which she once despised, showed her the true meaning of courage and compassion. Determined to change, Clara decided that as soon as she recovered, she would personally thank the dog and find a way to repay what he had done for her. As Clara continued her recovery, she was determined to transform her life. The accident and the dog's act of bravery changed her perspective profoundly. Clara reflected on how she had disregarded important values, such as responsibility and compassion. Her father was by her side, helping her overcome the difficulties. They started having more open and sincere conversations about life and what truly mattered. Clara realized she needed to use her experience for something positive. She decided that as soon as she was ready, she would get involved in volunteer work, especially in animal shelters. When she was finally discharged, Clara went to visit the shelter where her father had made donations. There, she found the dog that had saved her. He was with one of the caretakers and looked as uncomfortable as Clara had felt before the accident. Clara approached with tears in her eyes and thanked the dog for his bravery. The animal, with his attentive and gentle eyes, seemed to understand that Clara's life was now different. She decided to adopt the dog and give him a loving home. It was a way to repay what he had done for her. Clara knew this change in her life was just the beginning of a journey of self-discovery and growth. She was ready to face new challenges and build a future where compassion and responsibility were essential parts of her life. Clara and the dog, now named Max, started a new life together. Clara dedicated herself to caring for Max and getting involved in volunteer activities at the shelter where he had been found. She began working with abandoned animals and helped raise funds for the shelter, turning her experience into something positive and productive. Max quickly adapted to his new home, and Clara began to feel a deep connection with him. The animal seemed to understand her pain and was always by her side, offering comfort and loyalty. Clara realized how much her life had changed for the better since the accident. She found a new purpose and felt more fulfilled than ever. While working at the shelter, Clara met other people who shared her passion for animals. She made new friends and got involved in community projects, helping to improve the lives of animals and raising awareness about the importance of adoption and responsible pet care. The accident, which once seemed like a nightmare, became the catalyst for positive change in Clara's life. She realized that her priorities had completely shifted, and she was determined to live a more meaningful and altruistic life. As time went by, Clara became a passionate advocate for animal rights. Her work at the shelter and her dedication to animals brought new opportunities and challenges, but she was ready to face them with courage and determination. Clara used her experience to inspire others to get involved in similar causes and to recognize the importance of compassion. She continued to devote herself to animal welfare, organizing fundraisers and giving talks about the importance of responsible adoption. Clara discovered a new passion for life and found a purpose she had never imagined before. Her relationship with Max grew stronger, and they became inseparable, sharing moments of joy and tranquility. Clara and her father also fully reconciled. They developed a closer and more understanding relationship, reflecting on how much they had learned and grown together. Clara knew her father was proud of her transformation and the path she had chosen. Clara's story became an inspiration to many. She proved that even after difficult and painful moments, it is possible to find a new beginning and make a difference in the world. Clara lived her life with gratitude and purpose, always remembering the positive impact Max had on her journey. Together, they showed that compassion and true change are possible and that love can transform lives. Now, I want to hear from you. How did this story touch your heart? Leave your thoughts in the comments below and share how you think the world would be if we all took good care of animals as we should. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Until the next video, God bless you.